where I'm going to introduce you to Mark Osborne, director of The Little Prince and many other projects. And he's going to be moderating our Male Allies panel.
Thanks very much. And I'm going to quickly introduce, you all have bios with you, but I'm going to go down the line and introduce our panel today. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you all today. I'm really excited that we are getting this opportunity and excited to be sharing a table with these guys. We have Anthony Leo, who's the co-president of Aircraft Pictures. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Let's go give it up. We have Eric Beckman, who is the CEO and founder of G-Kids. Carlos Saldana is a filmmaker, director, recently directed Ferdinand at Blue Sky Pictures. And we have Shuzo John Shioda, who is the president and CEO of Polygon Pictures. And we also have Roland Poindexter, who's the VP of Television Development at 20th Century Fox Animation. So this is a huge topic. It's like I said, it's great to be a part of this day. I think we taking over this day and making this initiative and looking at diversity and inclusion this year. Last year, looking at unconscious bias, I think was a great first step. And I kind of want to start by talking about that and just to sort of get a little background. We all sort of have our own stories about unconscious bias. Mine in particular, I didn't realize that there was so much of an imbalance in the animation industry, and I really sort of had a moment of awakening. And I had female teachers and mentors in school when I was at Cal Arts. I had strong female role models and mentors at DreamWorks, like Melissa Cobb, who was the producer of Kung Fu Panda when I worked on that film. So it was sort of like always working with strong women, but not really realizing that it was sort of a boys' club, and there wasn't. It wasn't 50-50 in the ranks. And I just thought, guys are nerds and guys are more nerds than women are nerds. And it turns out it's not true. It turns out, and when you look at the studies that we have been doing, where they study, all the women that are studying animation in school, it's way more than 50%. So I guess I just wanted to start by going down the line and just talking about that moment of what was that moment that you went, oh, wow, this is something that we can actually get involved in, change and help and try to make a difference. This idea of that the world is 50-50, why isn't the industry? Anthony?
Sure. Well, the moment when I thought about this question that stood out to me was we were just in production on The Breadwinner, and this was, I guess, December 2016, and Cartoon Brew online had done a bit of a preview of the films that were coming out in 2017, and they previewed about 60 plus animated films, and I remember going through the list and it striking me that only 2 of them had female directors. One is a solo female director and one is a female co-director. And when you're looking at like less than 2% of the 2017 animated films being directed by women, that's when it really struck me, and definitely has kind of laid the foundation for what we've tried to implement since then, as far as achieving gender parity with our company. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Eric?
Well, I mean, if you look at money in the United States, it's all men on the money. All the gods are men. All men running all the big Fortune 100 companies. You'd have to be sort of blind to think that there's anything close to parity in the larger society that animation industry is within. As one of 1,000 examples I could give, we were looking at a film rental at the Directors Guild in Los Angeles, and I'm waiting for the rep to come down, and they have all these really amazing large-scale photos of directors on set. And of the 50 or so pictures up there, all of them men except I think one woman director. And so obviously there's so much globally and so much through all of society that we could be doing to make things quite a bit different in terms of how we run our world. Within my little 15-person company, there are things that we're actually able to try and do, and I'm happy to try and talk about today, but I'm also really wanting to hear what the women think that I and we should be doing.
For me, it was always, it's interesting because, as Mark was saying, like sometimes you don't realize, but we are a little bit of a boys' club, but if it seems normal, and then only when you start to see the change is where you realize, oh, we've been doing it wrong all along, you know? And actually, the biggest awakening for me was very recent, actually, was for Ferdinand, because I remember going to Sweatbox. If you don't know what Sweatbox is, it's like we check the dailies, the animation shots every day, and everybody gathers, and we talk to the supervisors, to the character leads, and all that. And in this particular production, a lot of the leads were female, and a lot of the animators, like a good portion of the animators were girls too, and it was something refreshing just to see, because it was not only trying to typecast the shots for, oh, this is a shot for a girl, we are talking about all the shots, we're talking about bigger issues, and it made a huge difference to me, because allowed me to rely more, or empower them more to do more and to show what they can do just beyond the boxes they were put in. And that it's an inspiring thing, because it inspires the others, you know. So I think that the key is to really find more talent like that, or nurture them from school, because those, like, it starts from the beginning. It's like, how can we, out of the 50+% women in school, how come we don't see that number in the companies, you know? And it's up to us just to think outside of the boys club box, you know, and just really be more proactive finding those talents and giving them chances, you know, not only typecasting them, but really saying you can do more, you can contribute equally, like the way it is. And then it was very refreshing, because for me, if I would gather my favorite shots in the movie, I think that 80% of them were done by women, so.
So when you run a CG animation company like I do, and about 300 people, you know, every day going to the studio, it's pretty blatant, because it's predominantly male, but I did some homework, and the composition of the studio is about 30% female, which is, from my conversation with Mark, is pretty much the same in the States, I guess.
Well, the industry has just kind of reached that.
Right.
It was a lot lower, but just recently they've realized, and the union did a study, that it's about there. Yeah.
Right. But as Mark said, I jury on a lot of student competitions. I go talk at schools. I'm based in Tokyo, so this is mostly about Japan. But you go to an art school that has an animation department, it's like 99% female. It's like going to a girls' school, actually, and so it's not like there are not talents. And so when I jury on student competition, I was telling Marge that, you know, we actually feel relieved when we choose somebody who is a male to in one of the awards, and so it's predominantly female that wins awards. And so in our company, when we look at the submissions for employment, it's only about 18% that are female. But when you look at the people that we are accepting, it's 40%, which means that the female artists have a better chance of getting in, actually have a higher chance of getting, which probably means that they're better. So I still haven't figured out. There's probably some unconscious bias that's still unconscious that I haven't really figured out, which is prohibiting female artists from applying to companies like ours. And yeah, but that's the situation currently.
And excuse me, for me, it all starts with the creative, and my entire career has been in television and developing and supervising the producing of animated shows for kids. And normally, through the course of the many years, you know, you'd see a cast of characters, and of course, you'd have your main characters, this crazy, especially in comedies, crazy, wacky comedy guy, always getting into trouble. And the person by his side, the co-star, is usually a female character who's the voice of reason, who's always saying to him, hey, you shouldn't do that, don't. And is totally a boring character because of it. And so, you know, a few years ago, I realized this, and I was like, wait a minute, no, everybody should be, every character, regardless of gender or race or, species should have their own funny traits. They should be funny in their own right. They should be interesting in their own right. And so we started focusing on that, and then it just kind of became a natural evolution, like, well, wait a minute. If we want to have funny female characters, maybe we should also be using funny female writers and funny female show creators. And so it's been an evolution from that. And then for me as a television executive and a development executive, I've also had to make sure that when I'm seeking out writers, when I'm seeking out creators and talent, and I'm talking to agents and managers, I specifically say, send me everybody, because the general culture has historically been a boys' club, and so when you call up, a lot of the representatives believe that they know what you're looking for, and in most cases they generally do. So it's incumbent on me to say, well, no, I want to see everybody. I want to see the funny women that you have, the funny guys you have. I want everybody to come in, and I think that gives me a wider opportunity to have a great talent base.
Actually, you bring up a great point, which is responsibility, and you talk about sort of that idea that you're taking on the responsibility of sort of asking those talent agents to give you more, and you're sort of taking on that responsibility. And I think that's a really important part of the discussion is how are we taking responsibility? How are we recognizing that we can make a difference? We're all in this together. We love this industry, and we want this industry to be as strong as possible. And it really does. There are great benefits for us to have as much diversity as possible. The other issue you bring up is on-screen representation, and the idea that it's tied together. We have on-screen representation issues, and we have behind the scenes, and we're seeing progress on both of those fronts. But just to talk a little bit about, by the way, I remember too, my deepest personal thing that I wanted to point out, my daughter said, she's 20 now, she said she wanted to be a filmmaker. She said she wanted to make films. And when she said that, like, my first thought seriously was like, oh no. Like, because it's painful making movies, and but I was like, it's a boys' club, and so that was also a part of the, like, wait a minute, and that was when I joined WIA. That was when I want to also mention Jinko Goto is my producing partner on The Little Prince. She is vice president of WIA, and she was the one telling me all this stuff as we were trying to staff up The Little Prince with as many women as we possibly could, and that was actually tied with this idea of on-screen representation. We had a little girl main character that was really inspired by this idea that, The Little Prince as a book has almost all male characters, and there was one female character, and so we really had to figure out a way to adapt that book and adapt sort of what the book is, to the whole world. And one way we did that was to create this little girl character as a way to sort of bring the audience in and create a balance with all those male characters in the book. So, so in order to do that properly, the first person I hired on The Little Prince was a woman. I wanted to hire a woman writer to write the script, to help balance out my own thoughts and ideas about what we could do with the material and how we could make this work. And it ended up being sort of the smartest move I made on the project, because it really started a process of us really creating as diverse as we could a cast behind the scenes to help us create something diverse. So I guess that's my next question is, like, where are those success stories for you guys, like places where you took responsibility and you feel like you made a difference and made a decision that ended up creating a benefit for you on a project or within your company?
Sure. Well, Aircraft Pictures does live action as well as animation, so this is a live action example, but we're just in production right now on a live action version of a series based on the character Holly Hobby. It's for Hulu. And that was a show where my business partner Andrew Rosen and I basically made a conscious effort to say, look, we're just across the board. When it comes to key creative positions, we're going to try and achieve gender parity, which we haven't consciously done in the past. We've worked with a lot of women successfully in the past. But this was the first time we said, okay, so all of our directors, our writers, our editors, let's just make that decision. And so it was a really interesting process because, there were things like agents, find out you're in production and they automatically call you and say, so do you have all your directors yet? And we had kind of at that point of this call, coincidentally filled our kind of male quota, like 50% male, I guess. We're still looking for some of our female directors, and this agent was like, we said, well, if you have any female directors, we'd love to take a look at them. We're hiring there, and they were kind of like taken aback a little bit, because they had no female directors at their agency, and so they were like, oh, okay. And so the call was pretty short, and it was like, well, if you end up needing any male directors, give me a call back, But it's this, I think it truly is, if people who are in positions of hiring are not able, aren't the ones that start setting that precedent and saying we want gender parity, then it goes to the agents. And so that agent turns around and goes, damn, I have to get some female directors on my roster, and I got to start looking more closely for that talent. And and that leads to, that agent talking to schools maybe and saying, send me some prospects that are female, because that's what I'm really looking for. And that's how it starts to happen, I think. So I think it really does kind of start from the top down. You've got to make that effort.
This ripple effect.
Yeah, the ripple effect of it all, And we did achieve 50-50, by the way, so.
Yeah.
Great. I'm not sure.
So we had some of this discussion at lunch also. I sat with Mark at the lunch just before this. In terms of what and we at GKids, I mentioned a fairly small company, and we don't have a lot of the corporate pressures in terms of overlords trying to force financial decisions on us. But still, I think we try and make a conscious effort. And for me, it's not about giving women opportunity, but it's about me wanting to be at a company that feels like a woman's company as much as it's a men's company, and for the benefit of my life and my enjoyment at work and the quality of what we do. So it's really, but anyway, here's some stuff that I try and think about. So one is just to shut up and let other people talk. And that's hard for me because I started a company and I think I know everything. But I can, but I'm able to do that. Sometimes it's in terms of how we get feedback from people. So one of the things we do a lot of times is get, we had a situation where there's a film we're looking to acquire at this festival. I won't mention the name of the film, and I really wanted to get feedback from a wide range of people in the office. When we sit and do conversations, a few voices tend to dominate, and then the discussion gets sent in a particular direction. And so I'm really always anxious to get one-on-one feedback and just do blind CC emails. Everyone please just email me specifically about what you think. And this woman we just recently hired, Erica Chan, in a marketing role, just had the most amazing description of this film, and has had brilliant insights. And I would have never found that out in a group discussion thing. So I think shut up and listen is one. Look at your payroll if you're running a company, if you're running a division, and see who you're paying what and try and even that up. See who's making decisions at your company, and really truthfully try and allow decisions to be made by other people. And what all this requires, and I think this is very hard for a lot of men, is just to let go of and go to that uncomfortable space where other people are making decisions that are going to affect your life and your company and your division and your P&L, and just get used to living with that, with that uncomfortable feeling of, is this going to work out okay? Because it really will. I was raised by a super feminist mom who started women's shelters. There was no dad in the picture, and so I think I've been oriented in this direction a lot. I can't sort of stop my maleness, but when we started the film festival in New York, we made sure that it was a 50%, more than 50% female jury. The new film festival, Animation is Film in Los Angeles, it's a more than 50% female jury. As much as possible, looking for ways to really have women participate on every level of what we're doing, and just listening to women tell you how to run your company better.
For me, it starts also with the creative side of it, like being on an everyday basis, like making a movie and working with animators, and you see a lot of women in production, but actually you see less in the actual like animation or storyboarding and directing side of it, and I think that making a conscious effort just to give chances or to give opportunities, and not so much take risks, but it's not taking a risk. It's because there's talent there, because if they are working for the company, you know, they are hired because of their talent. But it's just giving them opportunity to shine, or giving them like, not just box them in just because of who they are, but it's just but basically what they can do, so it's nurtured that talent, so they become eventually role models for others to want to come in and do it and be part of the team. So and that was something that proactively we did more, and we've been doing more and more, you know, from the get-go. You know, why can you leave like 50, you know, it's more than 50% of school, and we don't see that coming into the studio. So, and that's the effort that, you know, we constantly are trying to make, is just making sure that we are open for those things and giving them opportunities. And I found really amazing results with that, you know, just and in the project. So there's no turning back. So it's just now aiming higher and aiming for equality in both, like in all levels, not only with the work, but the quality of the work, and not just giving them more work, but giving them better work and allow them to shine. And I think I was very pleased with that during the project.
So for us, you know, being in Japan, the competition for talented people is very fierce. Especially, again, in Japan, we speak Japanese, and it's not like we can import people from all over the world. It's kind of hard, you know? And so for me, you know, getting the best of talents and trying to keep them is very, very important. Like I said, you know, we still have to do a lot of work in trying to get more submissions for employment from the female artists. But again, despite the minority, the percentage is actually higher. So, you know, it's very imperative that we try to keep them as long as possible. And so when a student matures, you know, they start to have family, we rely biologically on the female counterpart to have kids and have a bigger role in raising them. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do is to create an environment where, you know, the family, it's easier to raise a family. So being able to take maternal leave, paternal leave, or even after coming back to the workplace, you know, have a welcoming environment. Also being able to take time off, more elaborate system of taking, you know, time off by the hour. For instance, when kids get sick, you know, events during the school stuff, and so that kind of stuff. We try to make an effort, and it's not just a company effort. It's that notion has, I think, been very widespread amongst our employees, and so they actually do help each other out. And I've talked to a lot of our female employees for coming here and asked them, you know, what we can or what we are doing. I mean, to that end, we seem to have a very welcoming environment in terms of raising kids. So I think that helps in retaining them and also utilizing their talent, you know, further.
You know, I want to piggyback on something Eric said, because, you know, I'd love to say that, you know, I'm super conscious, and this was all driven by me, but you know, I was raised by a single mom as well, a professional woman, and so, and was always surrounded by a lot of professional women. So when I became a professional and I started having staffs that reported to me, it wasn't foreign to me to believe that, you know, women could perform the job the same as me or even better. And in fact, most of the people that I've worked for in my career that have run networks and studios have all been women. So I've always been in this culture of extremely competent, talented people that just happen to be women. And so when I hired people, I looked at their, you know, their capabilities and their personalities first, and their gender, you know, basically I didn't consider it at all. So of the people that I've hired, the vast majority of studio executives and network executives that I've hired have been women. Because to me, A, I knew they could do the job, and B, it was always important to me that if we were going to sort of diversify everything, it needed to happen not only on the shows and the productions that we had, but also on the staffs that ordered and developed those shows. So I think back now and think about all of the talented women I worked with, and that I was fortunate enough to recognize that this was someone I wanted on my staff, and I'm pretty happy about that.
So just to follow up on that, so I think my orientation, so my mom was definitely not a professional. She was more of a Molotov cocktail throwing hippie goddess. And which was really about tearing down the power structure was sort of the how I was raised. And so it's the relation that the company has to the male power structure that to me seems the most interesting to talk about. And I have a level of discomfort I'm noticing in myself that this feels sort of paternalistic, this whole conversation, and I'm trying to figure out how to break through that. But one thing that also came up in the lunch is this idea of, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, let's, you know, encourage women to speak up and let's encourage women to, you know, do good at this job. But a lot of times what we're doing is we're trying to have women assume male characteristics to fit into a male culture and a male-dominated culture, where it's the culture itself that needs to be changed. And
Right.
so we can model things out, but changing the processes, which is what we talked about, so that the processes themselves are more open, is really bad. And I hate living in a male world. I mean, I really do.
Especially right now.
I mean, so much. And I hate having to. We talked about this, like to man up and to be tough and to do this super competitive stuff. I really would die to work in a much more cooperative world. And I really truly think that if, you know, men were prohibited from having C-level positions at all public companies, that if men were prohibited from holding public office for 50 years, the world would be a much, 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 much better place. And I don't mean that sarcastically or to make a point. I believe that to be absolutely true. And so, so it's nice because animation it's small enough where we can really model out something that might be better. But anyway, whatever.
Well, okay, so you're bringing up a bunch of good points. One thing I wanted to say was there's a great podcast about the U.S. Supreme Court called More Perfect, and they just did one about who interrupts who more, and it was about the women constantly getting interrupted by the men, and then they actually really broke it down and studied it. It's kind of fascinating because the women had to take on the attitudes of the men in order to get heard. And then they were called bossy. And then it was sort of like, it's that idea of like, we need to change the conversation. We need to change the rules a little bit. We need to set things differently, which I think you're absolutely right. And I think it can happen organically, and I think it's starting to happen. And that's actually, like, okay, so there are benefits. You know, once we have this awareness, once we start talking about these issues, once we start talking openly about these things, there are definite benefits. And actually, Roland, you said something when we talked initially, and you said, you know, we shouldn't be doing diversity just because it feels good. We should actually do it because there are real benefits. And I'd love to go the other direction now. If you want to start by talking about that, what are those benefits, and how, like, what are those things that you've experienced? That
Well, you know, different elements of whatever your production are going to speak to different kinds of people within the audience, and I just think that the more diverse the production, the more diverse the creative contributions that you have in any one production, the more it's going to speak to a variety of people out there. Whenever you're working on something, you know, obviously, and this is true obviously for movies and television, you want as many people to engage with it. You want as many people to enjoy it as possible. And while there needs to be, in a lot of cases, a singular voice at the top, but, you know, hopefully that person is, male or female, is open to listening to their creative team that they've assembled. And if they do so, they're going to take into consideration all of these different elements of any given production that are going to make it that much more attractive and appealing to the widest audience possible. So, you know, it's just something I know that I always strive for, and don't always get right. You know, more often than not, I always have to check myself. It's so funny you brought up that study about interrupting people. I interrupt people all the time because I'm always right. And but I've also
You're an equal opportunity interrupter, though.
I am, but you know what? I tend to do it more with women. I think,
Okay.
you know, and I've caught myself. And I try now to be cognizant of that all the time. I mean, I think the larger point I'm trying to make here is that it's something you need to be cognizant of all the time.
Yeah.
In every facet of, certainly of your work, but in your life as well, that, you know, you have to be cognizant of just making an effort to be a broader thinking, a more considerate and empathetic person. And, you know, I know that's what I'm trying to do every day.
Yeah, the wider the range at the table, the more creative, the more you're gonna actually hit on a more diverse.
You're just going to get
range.
more.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and if you get more, you're going to give more, and then you're going to get more back.
Right. Anyone else have any real benefits that they can point to?
I'm going to steal one.
Yeah.
It was not my example, but I saw something recently. I was watching a new David Letterman show on Netflix, and Tina Fey was a guest on it. And you know, I just this really stood out to me as a really great benefit, but also such common sense. Like, you know, when we're producing or directing, and you're trying to make a movie or a TV series or something that appeals to a broader audience. And Tina Fey told the story. She was the first female showrunner of Saturday Night Live, and she told the story about this one writer who had been in the room. And I guess every week, I've never been in the writers' room Saturday Night Live, but from what I understand, every week people come pitch their sketches, and they can live or die right there on the floor. Like, it's very democratic. If enough writers think your thing is funny, then it gets on the show. If not, so next week. So there was she told a story about this one female writer who had, I guess, a couple of times over the years pitched this one sketch that had to do with like female health or products or something like that. And it always ended up on the floor. People just didn't think it was funny. But then over the years, while this woman was still on the staff, like there started to be a larger contingent of female writers on the show. So she decided to like pull it out again and pitch it one day, and the women thought it was hilarious, and it got on the show, and it did really well that night. Like, so it just shows you, like, the men weren't necessarily consciously saying, oh, that's a woman joke, I don't want it. They just didn't get it. Like, so by having more women involved, you're automatically opening up the possibilities of like how to create characters and plot and story that will relate to a wider group of people, I think, so.
I'll just point out one other benefit that goes to what you were saying, Shuzo, about like creating a more positive environment for families and trying to be encouraging of that. It seems like there's a lot of effort. I certainly benefited from that on Kung Fu Panda. Melissa Cobb had a young daughter. I had young kids, or my co-director had young kids, and she said, we're not going to do this the way it's normally done. We're not going to be here 10, 11 at night.
Yeah.
She's like, we're gonna have normal hours. She goes, there's no reason why we shouldn't.
Right.
And I was like, good luck. And she was right, because she made that goal, and she was right. And my family benefited from it. I mean, it was still hard, but we had much shorter hours and really didn't work weekends. And it was like, so I think it's those kinds of, that was a situation where I really didn't believe, and I think anybody in a position of power who wants to institute rules like that or create, try to implement things like that, it really is interesting. Actually, Eric, it kept coming up, or I think at the end of the talk at lunch, it was like, we all actually have the power to make these changes. And I think having these discussions and opening up the discussion as much as possible is the way to get there.
Yeah, piggyback on that. So there's an effects artist in our team, very, very talented, and actually her husband is head of production. So this husband and wife team inside of production, they have a very small child, and so she's working shortened hours currently. But so we're signing shots based on her working hours. But she's a very true artist, and she wants to get stuff done. And so she's actually turning out shots much, much quicker within the time frame, and even more so helping out, which is so visible because, her impetus of getting stuff done is real. I mean, as an artist, yes, but also she's got to pick her kids up. And so that's such a visible example that the rest of the people are actually slacking off, and there's so much better to do, you know, economically. And what more of a better example than looking at her? It's like she's doing this much within this much time, you know, no excuses, right?
Yeah.
And and we would not have had this strong impetus, this diversity, if not for, you know, us caring for families and giving shortened hours.
Yeah.
You know.
Let's hear for women in animation.
I thought you were rapping.
Oh, no, that was just a, you know, plug for the organization. Mid-panel plug. Okay, so you had already talked about, like, I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, how can we do better? And just go, like, look, we're all human. We're all, you know, trying to do our best. I think trying to raise awareness and trying to open these discussions. And I think that just talking about sort of what are those practical things that we're trying to do. And I think the no interrupting has actually been, you know, there have been a lot of great articles, I think, in the past year, especially since November, about like how can men be better? How can men do better? How can men, like, you know, and I think that there really are some really succinct, you know, bullet point lists of things we can do. But I wanted to talk about a little bit, because I think that's a big one that comes up time and time again about not interrupting. What are some other things that you're, you know, aware of and trying to sort of do, you know, to try to create as much, you know, to try to be a leader in your organization, in your groups, and try to model the kind of behavior that you want to see, you know, what are some things like that?
For me, it's like be proactive. You know, it's just like you just really keep your mind open for everything and just like give people the right chances. And, you know, because in my side of it is like all about, you know, we are making products for everybody. The success of a movie comes with like how many people go to see it, you know, right. Sometimes. And that needs to be everybody, men, women, like children, adults, you know, like in different, you know, countries, you know, different cultures. And part of it is, you know, nurture that diversity, you know, in all levels. So it's giving opportunity, or being open for those opportunities and get the true voices to come through. I think it's something that you just have to be aware. If you're aware of it, you will be more proactive doing it. It's not just like understand that there's a problem, but actually like tackling the problem, like just going after it and just trying to solve it. And it's something that, you know, sometimes we do unconsciously that we don't include those people in, you know, like we don't include diversity in, and then we have to be.
It actually came up at our table, and right. The action point, the action item that came out of the discussion at our table at lunch was be curious and less certain. Right. You know, don't think you know, don't go to the same well, don't try not to always follow the same habits, you know, and I thought that was a great way to define it. Like, allow yourself to be curious and model that and be less certain. You know, you feel like as a director, you feel like you have to have all the answers, and I find the creative process works so much better when I can state the creative problem and open up the conversation and try to get a diversity of answers back to try to sort it out together as a group, yeah.
You know, I also think, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but, you know, this is a part of human nature. Be selfish and recognize, you know, the opportunities that actually exist for you in being a more open and inviting person with regards to women in the workplace. I mean, one of the most important things for me, you know, we talk about women and, you know, balancing their jobs and child rearing and all of this. And I know I had a couple of women on my staff that were young mothers, and so I made sure that, you know, the schedules were such that they could go and take care of their parenting responsibilities. And then I recognized, well, wait a minute, you know, that in and of itself, I recognize my own sexism within my own family, because I relied on my wife, who was also working, to be the primary parent, child rearing parent. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, I need to be more of an aide and be more of a parent for my wife at home, and subsequently in sort of doing that and talking about it with these other women that were on my staff, I also made it easier for them. They felt less guilt about leaving work because they knew, oh, wait a minute, this isn't about me being a woman. This is about us being parents. And so I benefited actually both as a parent and as an employer by recognizing, oh, wait a minute, let me learn from them. And then we all benefit both at work and at home.
Yeah, that's great. I totally echo that, and I think the same things happen to me. The more I get involved in women in animation, the more awareness I have, the more I'm learning from all the studies that they're doing, the more I'm, oh, stop it, that's my timer. We don't have much time left. But the more I'm, the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media was also a big sort of eye-opening thing for me, and I think it's helped to, again, we're all on a journey, and I still have a ways to go, but I feel like it's helped me to be better in all respects, so one thing I would say, I think there are constant challenges though with maybe like coming up against less aware guys who are earlier on their journey, perhaps, going towards sort of being more supportive. And, there's sort of when I talk about women in animation, people say, well, why isn't there a men in animation? It's like, that's animation, this is about advocating and helping women and being a part of this. I mean, honestly, when I first asked Jinko, I was like, can I join women in animation? Is that weird? And, the idea that we are all in this together, I don't know, how do you open up the dialogue with more, maybe, I always say, we should join, that's kind of how I do it, and then I start the conversation that way. But do you come up against that, and how do you try to help encourage change?
Sorry.
Do you have any?
Well, kind of what we did with our TV series, I think if enough people kind of get out there and start mandating that's a priority, that gender equality in the workplace is a priority, then I don't want to say it's not the most positive way to do it, but you kind of start to shame people who aren't doing it. Like in a way, that's kind of like, it starts to become an embarrassment if you have a writer's room where it's like all men or something like that, and it should be. So I think leading by example is probably the most powerful way to do it. And, you start to see certain governments, like the Canadian government has kind of put it forward like a real priority to achieve 50-50. And I think Michael Fukushima was also saying the National Film Board has achieved that 50-50 parity when it comes to their productions and female and male-led projects. Quotas are things that exist hopefully just for a short period of time in the short term. Like when you have a divide where that Cartoon Brew example, when there's 2 female directors and 58 male directors, well, you have to do something if you want to actively change that. And then hopefully after so many years of having a quota when you can, I think that you don't need it anymore, and that's what you hope to achieve, kind of thing. But I think all of those initiatives will help. We have to just actively do something to change the balance of it, right?
I think there's a parallel with the whole bystander intervention movement for sexual assault, where men and women who are not actively involved need to say just bullshit. That's just fucking bullshit. And as a man on this panel, I don't feel very comfortable thinking that I have the right way of doing things at all. So I think one thing is you need to, as yourself, to continue to be open to what you should be doing differently, the mistakes you're making, to self-correct consciously innate biases across the board. I think there's again, we're a little bit separated from this, just the unique environment that my company works in. But I think there's a lot of times all that equality stuff is good, but we got a bottom line to hit, and we got to get this thing done on time, and we got to make money, and we got to sell tickets and all this stuff. And there's sort of I would say a inaccurate metaphor where if you have a manager of a basketball team, and you say, hey, you got to have half your roster is going to be women. You say, oh my God, how am I going to go against LeBron James with a female team? That's going to be impossible. And that's just bullshit. That's just not a good metaphor. And to the extent it is, then that game needs to be changed. We need to be changing a different game. But if you're just in a conversation and saying, yeah, she can't do that, or it says bullshit. And so, and you know, I think the number one thing, you know, I've said you shut up and listen, look at your payroll, look at your decision making, and with the letting go for men is the hardest thing. Just you have to let go, and you have to let other people make decisions, and you have to insist that other people make decisions. And you know, the whole thing, I don't know. When the Harvey Weinstein thing hit, and I know this isn't about Me Too specifically, I just felt like, oh my God, half of Hollywood is calling their lawyers right now. That's not what they should be doing. And so, or their publicists, or both. No names mentioned. But, you know, but I think it really takes some owning up to how deeply ingrained this stuff is, and just you got to let go and let other people. If you're in a position of power as a man, you got to let other people have that power, and there's no other way. And for women, I would just say, don't wait for the stupid men. I mean, you just got to take. You really can't. You cannot wait for the idiot men. You just have to, by all means necessary, take control.
That's fantastic. On that note, which I think is a brilliant place to stop. We're out of time, but I will just say to the men in the room or the men watching, you know, on Facebook Live, you know, join Women in Animation, become part. You know, we're all in this together. Like I said, we love this industry, and we're going to be much better. You know, when we're all together and we're all stronger together. And if you aren't joining, at least go to check out the Women in Animation and sign the pledge to get to 50-50 by 2025. And you know, I think we're going to get there a lot sooner. You know, the National Film Board example was amazing to hear, and I do think it is talking about it like this and opening up those discussions as much as possible with our male colleagues, I think is incredibly important. So with that, I will just say, quoting an earlier panel, we're all seeking to hopefully be the cool humans that came up earlier, because we're all, you know, everyone is seeking to be a cool human, and so this is one way we can do it. So I thank our incredible panel. Stay in your seats for the next panel, but I just want to ask for a round of applause for this group before we go.
Thanks for organizing, Mark.
All right, now I think we have to do a photo. Good job.
Photos?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay,
I have such a
right behind.
terrible fucking stage fright.